Okay, well, here we are. Welcome to this week's Ascended World podcast. This is Angela Coulter
Sarah Sieg, Avignone.
And we're doing this a little later in the week this week because we had some stuff to work through earlier this week. But it really was still important. Like we thought maybe we'll skip it. And then I was like, no, because there's so much other stuff that came in around it. And the stuff that we talked through, that Sarah and I talked through on Monday, was irrelevant to the bigger picture. It was, very personal parts of it. And then once we get past that, we can talk about the big, have gotten past that, so getting into the bigger picture. So, but this is really important stuff, right? So I don't know, where do you want to start?
Oh, gosh, I just don't even know. I know that we've talked about freedom and freedom to be yourself and to allow things to flow. And I think that what I saw this morning is that what we're going to talk about today just takes that to the next level of freedom when we start talking about releasing the rules of nature, because those are like the basis, the untouchable.
Right. Well, so we think, right?
Right. So we believed.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And that, okay, it doesn't matter what the laws say. It doesn't matter what your family says. It doesn't matter what the church says. The laws of nature supersede all that.
As we've believed, yeah.
Right. And so if you start talking about letting go of that belief, then that kind of snowballs into, okay, there's no such thing as natural consequences.
Right.
And, there's also, what came to me was it also releases karma.
So much. I mean, there's so many levels to this. Like, I can't believe it's almost like we unlocked this major thing in our discussion on Monday. So let's sort of backtrack for a minute and key everybody else in. I don't even know how we got, well, so we were talking about some other stuff that was related, but we couldn't really see the relation at the time, except that I had been getting pinged to talk about one thing. Sarah had to talk about some other stuff. And so I keep on getting pinged about nature and the elements and the power of the elements. And I keep on putting that aside. It keeps on coming in front of me. I keep on putting it aside because the Trinity energy progression practice is superseding all of that. It's like beyond any story or any structure or whatever. It's just that whole divine consciousness. So anything that comes in front of me that might be stories that we've been stuck in, right, I sort of put to the side.
Right.
Except it wouldn't be put to the side. It just kept on coming back in front of me. Conversations. And I have to laugh how that happens now, because if I try to put something aside that's supposed to be front and center, it'll just come back in such ridiculous ways. Like, then it just becomes more frequent, like conversations, commercials, like, oh my God, TV shows, movies, like things will come out of nowhere, conversations with people I would never expect to have, just thoughts and ideas and then practices. So the element thing just kept on getting put in. Now, we have a lot of belief systems that have based itself in working from the power of the elements, right? So you have Wiccanism, Wiccan, you have Druidism, paganism, and just many, many others. And actually many more are connected. It's just not, a prominent thing. And so I was like, so what's the importance of this? And I want to go back to what I saw on that show that we were talking about, right? So I had seen, Ancient Aliens on the History Channel, and sometimes I agree with it. Sometimes I agree with some of the stuff they talk about. Sometimes I'm like, yeah, that just doesn't resonate with me, but it's all good. And I just happened to catch, there was nothing on TV. I was catching that as I was going to sleep. And my husband was already asleep. It was like last week. And I was watching it, and something really grabbed me amongst all this other stuff about the elements coming in. Is that they're talking about Noah's Ark and
right.
and the whole story of Noah's Ark, right? and they were talking about they were talking about one vein of thinking around Noah's Ark, but then also this other background stuff had to do with the finding of the Dead Sea Scrolls, which is a very strong basis for the Jewish religion. Now, I myself have not ever read the Sea Scrolls, have read a translation of it or anything like that. But apparently, according to what they were saying, and I know I've seen this in other places too, right? So they're talking about how there's much documentation that talks about how before what they call the Great Flood happened, as however it happened, right? That humans coexisted with gods, what we call gods and goddesses, with fairies, with say dragons and all that kind of stuff, and star beings all together on the same plane. And after the flood, supposedly that stopped, and then it was just the human form that was here. So I thought that was really interesting, because I've seen that, and we've talked about this, Sarah and I and others that we know and stuff, that we remember us being, not only being in different forms, but that there were all kinds of different forms that lived here together for a period of time in some way, shape.
Right.
So what they were talking about on the show that I thought was really interesting, that really sparked this other thing, because I had all this other stuff that's been sitting on the shelf about the elements and whatever, was then they were like questioning, well, why were we left alone, right? They were looking at it from that perspective. Why were we left alone? Are we being watched, or blah, blah, blah. And I look at it from the perspective of, why did we choose then to eliminate all other life forms and just have the human form here?
Right. Have the human experience.
Yeah. And so they were talking about, are we supposed to evolve on it? And right away, like, I start getting these understandings and remembrances when I'm like just listening to this. And it's like, well, yeah, because we've talked about this, and the understanding that this Earth is a part of a project, a much, much bigger, multi-dimensional, multi-galactic kind of project. And Earth, as I understand it, has this very specific purpose to get to in completion, to be successful in terms of being part of like helping the rest of the project move along. And I saw that a long time ago, and now it's just starting to make sense. All these things dots are starting to connect. God, this is a lot of backstory. It's really hard. It's like, this feels like a month ago. So anyhow, I was thinking, oh, well, okay, right. We said, no, it's time for us to be alone so that we can take this form, take this creation in a holistic way, to evolve it the way that it's intended. And those of us who are managing the project are here to manage the project. And others can come and go, but not in like coexistence, but say like, visiting or whatever, So then I was like, well, what would be the purpose of that? And what came to me right away is, well, so that we could develop the very specific, and there's hardly any words to really explain this. And I'm going to try to explain this in words, and it's not going to be even close to the right description.
Right.
Into this. That Earth, it was to create its own brand of what we call magic, right? Its own brand of creation. And the initial intention was to do so through the way we created the elements, right? So we have 5 elements. Many say 4, but we actually have 5, right? So there's earth, air, fire, water, and ether, which is spirit, which is, by the way, in the Wiccan star, those are the 5 points. Those are what the 5 points represent. Not the devil or whatever. Anything.
Right, right.
So the funny thing is, I've remembered through the years, and I've always wondered why it was important for me to remember this. I remember being part of the different elements at different points of this existence.
Right.
And so part of, the feeling is reclaiming all of it together. And I realized, well, because of the way we separated this, because of the density we created, how important it was to remember, by the way, and what Sarah and I were talking about Monday is what? Our bodies, our physical bodies have all 5 elements in them. All 5.
Yeah.
And so for us to fully get to that place of wholeness and assimilation is to recognize and allow the wholeness and oneness of ourselves as part of the elements, right? And that's where power really starts to flow from. Because then we're aligning ourselves in this natural, right? The word natural just keeps on coming up, right?
Right.
Natural way, and we say natural in the way that we created it, even in our forms and everything around us. And part of what has fallen apart is when we try to control it through exclusion, through separation, right? So we try to control the weather, we try to control populations, we try to control balance, and like by overuse of certain things, and we get out of balance. And so something I've been looking at for a long time has been, why is it so important to look at the imbalances that we've created on the earth? And that's when all this stuff just started flooding in, because I wasn't even trying to think of that, but it just naturally came to me once we started talking about, what if we opened up all the gates and just allowed ourselves to be the elements again, right? Because it takes us back beyond the thought of creation to just simple creation.
Right. Instead, because I've always struggled with wanting to say, I want this to be like second nature to me. No, I want it to be the first nature. Second nature is something that's imposed on the previous levels, and it's like this goes all the way to that basic level.
It does. And if you think about, we have had so many quote unquote magics, right, that have pervaded through the ages, and many of them were, all of them were just built on some form of tapping into natural energies.
Right.
Right. And so like you're talking about how we've always considered nature to be above the laws of nature, to be above and beyond everything else. Right.
Right.
So what Sarah and I were sort of texting about or talking about, I don't know, same difference.
Right.
Had to do with, so we think that the laws of nature are immutable, except when we really take a closer look at nature, what is evolution? What have we created as evolution is, well, now it's time to change the rules, and we're going to take a different form.
Right.
We're going to integrate this differently.
Right. Which, and if you think about those people who are so, creationists versus evolutionists versus, all the different stories of how we came about. It's like you can see why the upset.
Right. Right. And that our forms have been created as part of the evolutionary process of the whole consciousness of the Earth project. Right. That's huge. Right. Because that's a very different perspective than to say, oh yeah, no, we rule this and whatever. And that's how we've been acting is, and it's not that we don't, because we are that whole consciousness and we're the bigger consciousness beyond that. But we've gotten into such a myopic perspective, microscopic perspective on things that we look at them from the separated standpoint instead of the whole, right? So what came to me that was like the epiphany that I had this morning was, so what I'm doing this whole month, right, the Ways to Celebrate Me month, and I've been looking at everything in my reality, right? And there's sometimes, and I've been guided to look at everything. Look at the hairspray you use. Look at the makeup you use. Look at, what you're doing. And what I realized is what I was really not what I'm doing. It's how I'm aligning, right? So it's not that, like, and I'm like, I'm always somebody that says, well, this is all an illusion anyway, right?
Right.
It's all different concentric levels of illusion.
Right.
So it's whatever level we choose to be in. So that's part of why I was resisting that whole thing with the elements and nature. And then I'm just going, so why am I so guided? And I had asked that a long time ago. Like, why does it matter? Why does it matter if we do organic and blah, blah, blah? Because this is all illusion anyway. And the answer I had gotten was because the alignment, the conscious alignment is important, right? With the physical surroundings. And I was like, okay. And until you get past that to a consciousness beyond that, and then you realize it doesn't exist anyway, but then,
Right.
then it's just naturally all aligned, because if you're in that wholeness, it's just done, right?
Right.
So it's funny is like, so like I already had a pretty natural organic life and everything else, but I have been just uber conscious of all these things this month. And it just came to me this morning. I was like, oh, well, that would make so much sense, right? If everything we use, right, ingested, put on our bodies in whatever way,
Right.
was all nature based, right?
Yeah.
That is the alignment of saying I acknowledge and align myself in interrelation with those core powers of divine
Right.
consciousness in those elements, right?
Oh, that feels really good.
Yeah. And it makes it easy because then we're not fighting, right? Because if you think about it, if we're like using a whole bunch of stuff that's not based that way, that's, created and whatever, it's like we're fighting against it to get back to our natural self. But if we're already doing that and aligning, it's just so much easier.
And right. It's like just totally dissolving that extra layer.
Yeah.
And that extra layer is only there because we hold it in place.
Yes.
So letting go of it frees up all the energy that was used to hold that in place.
Yes. So I was like, wow, that just makes so much sense. And I always laugh so hard when I have something that comes into me after I've been guided to do something. And I'm like, I have no idea why I'm doing this, but I'm just, I have the compulsion and guidance to do it. And then I'm into it. And then it's like, oh, well, that's why I was guided to do it. Cause I didn't even see what that was about to begin with, so very cool.
Right.
Because the best way to celebrate ourselves is what? To have that full alignment.
Right.
Right. Because to know that we were the ones that created this, not from these forms, from a much, much larger scope of consciousness. And each of these forms has a purpose. And so the key is for us to complete this part of the project is to bring that consciousness into here and at the same time allow it all to be whole and integrated and evolved in the way that we intended. Right now, whatever we intended is still unclear, but
yeah,
in a conscious way anyway. But it feels like this is a huge step in terms of allowing ourselves to flow. And what we were talking about Monday, for anybody listening, that like, it's the same thing with our emotions. We talk about the way we talk about things, right? Like you're saying, Sarah, like this feels natural, or it's
right.
like nature, right?
Right.
There's nature. But like we talk about flow, right? We talk about, allowing and it's really when we are pulling that intermediate layer in, right? And that I would believe that the ego is what the ego managing separation here is what
right.
created that layer that has sort of created this brick wall in many cases that prevents us from going beyond it, right?
Right. It almost like a built-in fail-safe.
Yeah, and we get what we believe, right? Because we think, oh, just in case, but that's the.
We want to make sure we ensure the project.
Yeah.
The continuity of the project.
And so when we get stuck in all of the mind-based drama right? The emotion stuff, the separation based stuff, the fear, the anxiety, the anger, judgment, shame, guilt, and doubt, and all that kind of stuff. That is hitting the brick wall.
Right. Well, and when you think about judgment, I thought about this yesterday, is sometimes you get caught in that trap of feeling that someone needs to suffer consequences for behavior. And that again perpetuates it, and it's that only the judgment that keeps it there. So again, it's letting go of that judgment from the perspective of allowing it to well, it sets it free from the constraints of consequences even.
Right. Right. And when we start to look at things from that perspective of, is it based in the brick wall, or is it based in the natural flow of nature and how we've created it, right?
Right.
Then we can see why we start seeing everything in a completely different way. It's just really...
It really is. It's almost mind-boggling.
Yeah. To be like, oh, because all of that's the created stuff. And it's almost like this. We collectively, this is the other stuff that was coming into me this morning too, is like you were saying, a lot of stuff was coming into you last night. For me, it was this morning. It's like, so collectively, we said, this is what we're going to do, right? And part of it, we had to do with that function of the mind, of the ego managing here, right?
Right.
As we right. But it's like we lost the balance, which is, I believe, why we've like peaked and crashed, because it's always like a crash of the ego in some way, right?
Right.
From the ego. So it's like, if we acknowledge, but yet recognize, yes, there are things. So like we have invented so many things, right?
Right.
And yes, we have done stuff to help, but in reality, a majority of the stuff that we create have nothing to do with helping the flow of the whole. Right?
Right, right.
Many of the things we create have to do with like improving the flow of the individual, but sometimes it's to the detriment of something else. And there goes that rule that people believe is there, that you have to use something from one place, you have to deplete from another. Right,
exactly. Absolutely. That was something that yesterday was like, that belief is so ingrained, even in nature. And it comes back to that, the premise that matter is neither created or destroyed. It just changes form.
Right.
Which tells you that there's only a certain amount of it. And that's what all our sciences are based on.
Right. Except energy is infinite.
Right. Exactly.
It never goes away. So if we shift our perspective to realize that, then that changes everything in terms of comparison, right?
Right.
This just feels so awesome and huge. And
yeah, it's almost, I'm struggling with words.
Yeah, because it's not quite catching the meaning that I'm feeling. So
right.
Yeah, so it's like when we commit ourselves, so what I'm getting is the importance of committing ourselves to superseding the beliefs and the mind management, to recognize its purpose. Because here's the thing, we have thought of some things that have improved the whole, right? And helped to evolve certain things.
Right.
But the thing is, what happens more times than not is we start out that way and then it gets somehow degraded through the ego, right?
Exactly. Yep.
So if we commit ourselves to the pureness of the intention that comes from the heart, and I keep on seeing the heart eye, that fourth eye, which is the eye of the heart, that supersedes the third eye, which is the eye of the mind. But it's like, it's like aligning with that is not just aligning with that, it's being that. It's becoming the elements. It's being, like knowing.
That's the filter. That
Yeah.
becomes the filter instead of the mind being the filter.
Yes. And that's so, oh my God, that feels so awesome in my whole.
Oh, that does.
It's like, yeah, that. That. So, and I think that has to do with this whole big movement of people coming, like into, like they say, like vegetarianism or veganism, right?
Right.
So part of it has to do with, like, in the natural cycle things, we've created that whole like meat eater or whatever, and I always say that in nature, animals eat each other all the time.
Right. Absolutely.
But I think what's become degraded is, in general, the way we do our meat. Like, we're not going out and hunting our own meat, right?
Absolutely.
Right. Which, again, earlier this month, I went to like that whole, the butcher box that does all the, grass fed.
Right.
Humanely raised, in a way, free range and, like whatever, happy animals and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
Which does align more naturally, right? And people go to veganism and vegetarianism because they're like, well, it's not natural. It's like, well, but it is natural. It is natural the way we've evolved our bodies to eat meat in many cases.
Right.
But not the way that we've been producing it.
Exactly.
But
well, it's the premise that you're consuming another form of energy.
Yeah.
Whether it's plant energy or whether it's animal energy, and then you start looking at how that energy's been created.
Right. Well, and look at the thing that I look at is it's no better with plants than it is with animals.
Right. It's the same thing.
Because
don't bleed.
Right. But they've done these like research. They've done so much research that says, well, when you cut a plant, it screams. It does its version of screaming. It lets out these like chemicals and whatever.
Right.
The smell of grass being cut in the lawn that people love so much is actually the equivalent of grass screaming in alarm because it's being cut. Plants, it's been shown that trees will change their chemical makeup when animals that eat it are nearby to try to repel those animals from
eating it. Yep.
So, and plants taste different. Their fruits taste different after we pick them than when they're on the plant because it's, just part of like what's been, like evolved. So it's no different. But then if you think about and so then you think about this. So if you're a vegetarian or a vegan and you eat GMO plants, is that any better?
Exactly.
Right?
And the ultimate answer all the way to the top is
it doesn't matter. No. No, but in the middle steps.
Right. With where we live or where we believe we live.
In this body part of us. Right. But that's where the alignment happens. And it's like, and I think that it's like I said, like we said, at this higher level, it doesn't even exist. However, for the part of the project that we created in creating the earth, there is an importance of that alignment.
Right. The part where we're participating in at this moment.
Yes.
In fictional time.
Yes. In the whole project, which by the way is already done.
That's right.
So we don't need to go into that yet.
No.
So yeah, this just rolls down the hill like this huge old snowball, because you can start seeing so many connections. And that's what I always say, well, whatever we do, so if you go back to the eating thing, I'm like, whatever we do, choose to do it in a conscious way.
Right. Conscious alignment.
Right. Conscious alignment. And that's why that guidance has been there. Right. What we're doing with the chemicals we've created to, it was something that has struck me from the very beginning of when I first saw the movie The Matrix, right?
Right.
Was that scene when Agent Smith had Morpheus, right, in that room, and he's like, he's all chained up, and he's like in the Matrix, and he said, so like humans, He's like, humans are parasites. Like in how he was going on and how like everything else naturally assimilates and interrelates with its environment. But humans deplete everything until they've raped it, you know, like they've,
and then they move on.
And then they move on, which is really a parasite.
Right.
And I'm like, you know, that's actually really true in many respects.
It is. It is.
And look at like what we're doing, and like we're, you know, we've become so like our consciousness, we've gotten so lost in the management of the ego at this level of consciousness and this level of existence while we're incarnate here, that this is why many of the, you know, like the well-known, you know, like Buddha and whatever, are like all about the non-attachment to physical stuff, because all the stuff that we create based on ego is typically out of alignment with the whole of nature as we've created on this planet. Right?
Right.
So, like we start building houses to feed the ego more than to house us.
Right.
Right? We start making clothes to feed the ego versus really serving us.
Yep.
You know, we start, there's just so many things, you know, we create that are to feed the ego and to prove outside of us that we're already that we're worthy, right? The perception of worthy, but yet we really, if we go beyond that brick wall, beyond the yellow brick road,
yeah,
we realize we already are worthy. So we don't need all those things. And that's the non-attachment part of live in a cave, live in a yurt,
right.
which keeps on coming up lately. Live in a yurt. Because we judge people based on what do they live in, right? Yeah. Somebody's living in their car or in their van and they're perfectly happy, but so many people will say, oh, like they have to live out of their van.
Right.
But think of the level of non-attachment that people have when they're at that place, you know?
Right. Right.
So, and it's not saying to have to get rid of all that stuff, but that's the part of our looking at every action that we have, everything we use, everything that we incorporate into our lives, and ask ourselves, is this in alignment with that bigger picture? Does this align with the perpetuation and the integration of the whole of the elements and the elemental magic that we've created on this planet and the presence of this planet? Or does it fight against it and prevent it from realizing its evolutionary whole?
Right.
And that's all I have to say about that.
Wow, that's so much shifty.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Oh, yeah, that's just so big.
Yeah, it really is. It's almost like, I don't know, the picture keeps coming to my mind. You know, when I was little, we had the little drawing things where it was like a piece of black wax with the little paper plastic film that laid over it and you drew something.
Oh yeah, I love those.
Yeah, disappeared.
Uh-huh.
I keep feeling like that's on my brain, and that that I'm pulling the little paper off to unleash such different thought patterns, that it was holding in, you know, specific patterns and beliefs. It feels confusing, but yet a relief. And
it's like a reset.
Yeah, exactly.
Of so many things. Wow, it just sort of like, talk about tentacled and entanglements and stuff. It's like just disentangling so many things.
Right. Yeah.
And what we were seeing on Monday was this whole like cloud of entanglements. Remember, it was like a big old like hairball of entanglement stuff. And we're like, well, of course we never don't get past this point, because we get stuck in that. Like we'll get out to the point where we just have one foot in and we get stuck. But then if we do this, it feels like we do this way. It truly just puts us past it immediately.
It makes it different right away.
Yeah. And that is where we have stopped short in many of the belief systems that were element based, because then we tried putting our minds to it and managing it through the mind instead of letting the elemental core of consciousness of the whole of the planet. Oh, let's see, there's the big yawn.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Manage it. Like, and it's not that we are the puppets, it's that we are the bigger consciousness, allowing it to flow through everything.
Right.
And instead of trying to control it and manage it from the mindset, meaning that there's this is this and not this, creating the rituals and the incantations and all that kind of stuff, yeah, that helps us to remember it. But it also limits us to some degree, because we are saying that the only way to do this is through that.
Right.
Instead of saying, this is already here and I'm just going to let it flow.
Yep.
Because I know at the higher consciousness, this whole creation is interrelated and perfect. And we will evolve it. We are evolving it in the way that is intended, when we look past all of the facades of all the mind-based creation that we've done.
Right.
Which is why all of it's starting to crumble, right? The financial markets, the political, environment, the institutions of all kinds. It's like, go back. Oh, it just uncovers so much.
It really does.
I really don't think we need to talk anymore. I think we need to just go out and just align ourselves with that.
I agree. I definitely agree.
So, whatever. Oh, it's funny to remember that, to allow our full being to be not just aligned with that, but to be that full flow of it.
Right.
Always.
Yeah.
Which means we can't exist any other way. That's the only way we can exist then.
Yep.
All right. More yawning.
Righto.
All right, you ready?
I am.
So we just need to sit with that for the rest of the week.
Oh, wow. No kidding. It was like coming home on a whole different level.
Yeah. Yeah, it was. I even went back to seeing that whole like reason. Yeah, I just flowed through so much in that. Like we were on this big wave of something.
Yeah. Well, in the beginning, the physical shifts were
Yeah.
major, just so major and so physical. I don't know another way to put it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I felt
Yeah.
like my core opening to everything is like massive now.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't even explain everything that I saw because it just flowed together so perfectly. Basically went back to the core that looked like the seed in the center of the earth, and it was like just everything blossomed out from that, and it was just amazing. Whew.
Well, and I could vaguely hear, and I'm assuming it's the water in your fish tank.
Yes. Uh-huh.
And it sounded like someone whispering in my ear in a language, like light language.
Oh,
And it was so powerful.
nice. Oh, my phone dinged, obviously. Oh yeah, I went back to yeah. There were just so many levels of even that whole like separation of that evolution of the human presence on its own. And I saw the bigger picture of that, and there's a singular purpose for that, and it's just to get past all of this other stuff that we've let take over. That it's like coming to the core of what that mind, hive mind, is what I got. Was created for, to create in unison with this, and it was really really powerful. I was just like, okay.
Yeah.
And it felt just as unimportant as it felt important. You know what I'm saying? It was
Right.
like okay, yep, it's done. And it felt so free. Talk about freedom.
Yeah.
Of flowing through everything.
Yep.
Oh, I just can't wait to see what this brings, because this is just
I know.
bigger than anything we've looked at.
Yeah, definitely bigger than the bread box.
Oh, well, I'm glad we waited to do this till today. We needed 2 days to even get to it.
I know.
All right. Well, everybody, thank you for joining us. And I'm sure we'll have more to add on to next week. And who knows what's next.
That's right.
All right. Well, thanks for joining. This is Angela Coulter and
Sieg, Avignone.
bringing you this week's Ascended World. Have a great one.
Thank you.